All right. Hopefully, Colum will be along shortly. Just getting ready for the day here. Getting ready for the day. It's a beautiful day out here in Colorado. Absolutely spectacular day. I wonder what the weather's like in other places because the weather here is great. Even when it's not good, it's great. Um, I feel like weather can be fun for people. It can also murder people. It can also kill people. I think that's one of the things that's why we talk about the weather so much. I used to think it was dumb. When I was a kid, I'm like, why does everybody care about the weather so much? Why would you need to care about the weather? It's going to happen eventually. Does Why does the weather matter to everyone? Because it could kill us. I think that's basically it. I've resigned myself to the fact that if I'm going to die in some catastrophic way, the chances that it's the weather are pretty high at this point. I'm pretty sure it's just like look, if you're gonna die of something, uh-oh, columns here, columns here. Let's let him join. There he is. Ah, there he is. How are you, sir? Uh-oh, I can't hear you. Wait a second. Is that my fault?
Yeah, no, we're
No,
no. Well, we're good. We're good. I just needed to press a button down here, and we are sorted.
I like your new setup. Well, it's I don't know if how new it is, but it's kind of new, right? That's a different
Yeah,
place.
it is well, it was merely turning it like using angles. I went back
Mm,
to secondary school maths, used angles and moved the desk and gave it a whole new appearance.
very nice, very good. So how are things on Broncos Europe these days? Because there's no football, but there's still Broncos fans. So
Well, the I suppose the nice thing about what we do and being Irish probably helps in this. We just like to chat and just have the crack with people.
yeah,
So we're less about worrying about say analytics or arguing the finer points, and it's just to hear stories. I think that is one of the really good things. I mean, culture is always interesting, but there's just interested in hearing stories. So for us it's all right. It's great. We're getting to chat with people. I'm sure for people who really want to discuss the game itself, or it's probably awful because I mean
right.
there's nothing going on.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you. I like just having a chat. It's way better. It's so much better than preparing statements and statistics and all of that garbage. It's the worst. It really is. I came to this conclusion during the first wave of analytics because I started doing sports talk radio in 2008 for the college radio station at Arkansas, and then I got my ESPN gig a year later as a sophomore in 2009, and then in 2009 on out, it was like this move towards analytics, right? This first of all, player efficiency rating. John Hollinger's, it's his fault. Everybody wants to blame Bill James for writing that book about sabermetrics. I'm not gonna blame Bill James. Bill James was just I think he had gotten to the point where he's like, you know what? I've only life only lasts so long. I need to write this book. And that's basically where he was, because he wrote that thing when he was like a security guard at a bean factory or something. And really, it's John Hollinger's fault. The GM of the Memphis Grizzlies, who used to be a journalist who came up with the player efficiency rating. And then he started saying, like, hey, do you realize, like, these are the players who are actually good? Because of all these stupid arguments that people were having about like the greatest player of all time, which by the way hasn't changed. So that's the reality of analytics. It's like, okay, all right, you go over there in the corner and have fun with math while the sport happens. And I'm sure that your probability ratings for all the things that happened were like, well, I got, this was 76% probability, which means it's a pretty high probability. And I got that right. But this other one that was 87% ended up being wrong. But I told you that I had a 14% chance of being wrong. So in reality, it's just a way for me to not commit to anything and just acknowledge that I could be right or wrong about anything, which is where we already were. So at this point, if you're a sports fan and you want to enjoy sports, just watch the game. Just watch it and enjoy it and have fun, and don't stick your head down in your phone looking at tweets from people who are like, the red zone efficiency of this player is 77% on play action. It's like, yeah, but you missed the touchdown, right? So, like, let's just watch the game, guys.
Yeah, I think we've seen that definitely in all sports. I mean, it's interesting how the discussion around sports has even changed, right? Because and I think in soccer, right? So now they talk about, right? Firstly, it became the assist, right? And then
Hmm.
the assist was if you score a goal, so you score a goal. If I pass the ball to you, that's an assist.
Right.
Now, right? Now, and I mean, even that is like, okay, but now it's the pre assist. So it's who passed the ball to me before I passed it to you before
Right.
you're supposed to go.
It's the build up. Yeah.
Oh, it is. It's excruciating and it's boring. And the hilarious thing is, people will die on a hill for that, and then it changes. Okay,
Hmm.
so and suddenly people have to go and delete all the tweets because they can't admit they were wrong.
Right.
And it's hilarious. Like you see these like, oh, this guy is going to be absolutely fantastic. This young player, right? Because his
Hmm.
stats are such. With nobody going, yeah, but what's the transition going to be like? Is he going to remain motivated when he suddenly gets money? When he suddenly has everyone bowing down to him and
Yeah.
telling him everything he does is right? And there's nothing that there's no metrics for that. So I think it's like the worst aspects of, unfortunately, of technology. And this is where I would say pub chat has changed, right? Because
Hmm.
previously you used to have ridiculous talk, right? Which was good crack. You'd have a few pints, right? And suddenly you'd be like, hey, you remember when Wesley Snipes was in Twin Peaks? And you'd be like, Wesley Snipes was in Twin Peaks? And you'd be like, yeah, he played the guy, remember? And like suddenly this entire conversation would emerge, right? About Wesley Snipes being in Twin Peaks, which was fantastic. And you spent
Right.
2 hours on this, right? But
Yeah.
now somebody goes, you say it in a pub, right? And somebody goes, no, IMDb, it says he wasn't. And awful. It ruins like that aspect of the
Yeah.
absurd. Um,
I do think that the existence of smartphones has changed a lot of arguments. There's no doubt about it, right? Because we have access to so much information now, and I'm that person because my wife will say some just wrong shit when we're watching TV, and I'm like, that's not correct, and I look it up on my phone, and I'm like, see, and that's a part of our marital discourse at this point. It's just us. It's just me asserting my useless trivia dominance over my
em-
wife.
I say embrace the wrongness and go take it to the next level.
Okay, okay. So you're saying is not only are you going to commit to the fact that Wesley Snipes was in Twin Peaks, but you're going to die on that hill. You're
Oh
absolutely
yeah,
out there,
like absolutely. Like imagine what that would have been like, and then just discuss that. Like take it. Yeah,
right?
I think that's the way. It makes for a much more interesting and hilarious conversation. The absurd and the potential. Ah, yeah, way more interesting than the reality very often.
Was Twin Peaks, was there any overlap for between Twin Peaks and Demolition Man? Because that's what I want to know. I want to know whether or not we get blonde Wesley Snipes or just, run of the regular black Wesley Snipes. That's what I'm talking about. Like there's which Wesley Snipes are we getting? Are we getting Blade? Or are we getting Demolition Man?
I could certainly picture blonde Wesley Snipes hanging out with uh, David Duchovny in a dress in Twin Peaks. That would I could see that. You could definitely and uh, Dale Cooper, Special Agent Dale Cooper with those guys on a case. There's a spin-off series in that, I think, we should get on to Kyle MacLachlan and see does he want to do
Wait a
that.
second. Was David Duchovny in Twin Peaks?
Yeah, he was. And I'm not. That's not what I'm not even making up. Yes, he played a transvestite in Twin Peaks
Okay.
at a time when it wasn't even, really talked about. And in fairness to David Lynch, he was like, "No, I'm going to do this, and this is the way it is." And he played it like it wasn't done in a completely absurd or mocking way. It was like
Hmm.
this is who he is, and this is part of the character.
What's
It
the
was
name of the main actor in Twin Peaks? He was
Kyle, Kyle, Mac,
also he was
Kyle
Moadib.
MacLachlan.
What's his name?
Kyle MacLachlan.
Kyle MacLachlan.
He, yeah,
Is he? So that's an Irish name. That sounds pretty Irish. Is he of Irish descent?
he's certainly of Celtic descent. Whether he's of
Irish,
Irish
Scottish.
or Scotch, I don't know, but one or the other certainly.
Yeah. So I started watching this show, The Last Kingdom, and all growing up, my mom and grandmother were obsessed with Celtic culture. They just absolutely they could not get enough of it. They're reading Diana Gabaldon books, like just like it was. I had to sit through very uncomfortable sex scenes in the back of my mom's van with my two brothers while my mom and grandma listened to Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series. And as a 12-year-old boy listening to time traveling ladies who are all into the muscular Celtic men, it was just not it was very uncomfortable for me. That's my connection to Celtic Irish culture as a child. It's like my mom was really into it. She also read a lot of like Dorothy Dunnett books, which is actually really good historical fiction. If you ever want to get into
Okay,
historical fiction,
okay.
Dorothy Dunnett wrote. I think it was called Game of Kings. I think.
I'm not from I read a lot of historical nonfiction, but I haven't read a huge amount of historical fiction. But I do I'd say I kind of do three nonfiction, then do a fiction, and then go back again.
So you might be able to give me more details on this. So the Last Kingdom is all about what happened right before England became a country. So it's I think his name is it Edward or it's some it Alfred, King Alfred. He was the king of Sussex. And I guess and at this point now I'm just guessing that Sussex means south and Wessex means west and Nussex means north. There's no Nussex. But that's basically what it is. And I had no idea that the Danes, like, basically conquered the British Isles before England. They had to, like, drive them out. Like, they came over on their boats, took all the land. I didn't know that. I had no idea that the Danes were, such a
Oh
problem
yeah,
on the British Isles
the
for a while.
yeah, and here too. But we forgave the Danes because they came and they did terrible things to us, but they left in an Irish context. And so we totally forgave them for that. Like Ireland, Denmark, it's all good. Our nearest neighbors, we have a much more complicated relationship. I just think I think nationality is great fun, right? Like I love being Irish. I love what that means in terms of the culture I grew up in. I love
Hmm.
that it means that I everywhere I go in the world, and I just want to talk to people, and they want to talk to me and share stories. But I'm under no illusions that there's anything innate about national identity. It's something we made up, and it's
Yeah.
good to have fun with it. But I personally cannot imagine like going to war on the basis of national identity. That just is bizarre
Oh,
to me.
yeah, it's crazy. And I think that maybe that has to do with our connection to sports. What's happened is that, sports became this basically this thing for warriors to do, the people who would be warriors. If we'd been born in ancient Greece or something, they're the people who are out in the front with, charging at the other army. You know, they're the generals. Bill Belichick is probably running some sort of military operation, for Rome, right? Julius Caesar and
Oh
Bill
yeah.
Belichick are going at it, in a different time. So, it's, and I think, that's kind of part of how I view war now. Really, is like in reality, I think it should really be more kind of a dance. It should be a game, and it should be a way to resolve the conflict, not to assert your dominance over another group of people. And no, I think you're absolutely right. Like, and what's weird about that is I wonder if part of the issue or some kind of like the just lack of agreement that America has to do with the fact that geographically it's just such a big place that like you talk about national identity. I think Americans a lot of times, like, it's layered, right? Like, they basically, it's state identity or city identity or wherever it is you associate yourself. Like, when I was a kid, Arkansas was the place. I didn't really refer to myself as like, I live in Fayetteville. Fayetteville's my place. I mean, there's a little bit of that, um, segmenting going on in every population, but in reality it's like you kind of identify yourself from the place that you come from. And a lot of my youth, I was trying to get away from that. It's like, I don't want to identify myself with a place. I don't want to identify myself with an institution. I don't want to identify myself with a nation or anything like that. I want to be me. And but I think that's that's the choice, right? You have to figure out what you want your identity to be. Do you want it to be based off of something internal, or do you want it to be based off of something external? Because external is
Mhm.
so easy. It's so easy to follow.
Oh yeah, George Carlin does a lot of good pieces about this and about what you'll do in the name of a group that you'd never do as an individual. There's no way. I mean, when you look at what groups do, and you look at the way in which you can lose yourself and lose your identity or attach to, I suppose I think that's what's interesting about nationality, and I think that's what's interesting in sometimes in relation to religion, particularly more extreme religions where people attach their identity to that, and that becomes
Yeah.
everything for them.
Did you see
Um,
this story this morning? Al Jazeera. I want to say it says Al Jazeera English. Al Jazeera English, a Twitter account, posted a story today that I saw, which was about in Germany. There's this female-run mosque. So it's a mosque that's being run by women, and they're trying to reform Islam in that country. And the mentions on this tweet are just like, garbage. It's just like, it's very Muslim. I mean, like, fundamentalist. I don't know exactly how that religion like sections out in terms of how people interpret that, but I know that there are denominations and distinctions that a lot of people want to make. And like, here's the problem. I understand the roads when it comes to uh, Christianity, right? You've got your denominations, you've got thousands of them in the United States. There's a couple of big ones, but it's mostly like Catholic, evangelical, Baptist, that kind of thing. And that division I think is pretty easy for us in the Western world when it comes to Christianity. But then you throw in another religion, and you're like, I don't know, it all kind of looks the same to me. I don't know what the distinctions are because it's not a part of what I grew up with. But, I saw that and I thought to myself, that's not going to go well. That's just something that I cannot see anything good coming of that. And now all of a sudden I'm afraid for people's lives. I don't know. I don't like having that feeling. I wish that feeling would kind of go away. I don't know how many things left I have that feeling with. Really, at this point, it's just religion. And because the nationality stuff, I'm not really worried about any other countries per se. I know there's some crazy people on Earth, but usually it's just like, I think it's becoming a little bit more decentralized. I'm less concerned about countries invading, and I'm more concerned about people using those kind of decentralized entities that are not countries, to either manipulate people or to try to change things. I don't know how it's going to go, but yeah, I would definitely say, like, I'm a little bit more concerned from a religious perspective at this point, because it seems like the further away we get from most people believing, stuff that's not right, inaccurate scientifically, kind of like that fundamentalist, like the Earth is 6,000 years old stuff. The further away we get from that, I feel like the crazier the fundamentalism gets. The more willing they are to go to drastic measures to do terrible things.
I think fundamentalists of any sort will always do that, and I think they'll always find a reason. And I think what's interesting, if you look as we move towards, say, the year 2000, right back in the 90s, you had all these apocalyptic religious groups that suddenly emerged, and they were convinced the world was going to end, right? And
Hmm.
some of them took drastic action, and some of them took action that the world outside went, we don't understand that, we want to investigate that, and it ended terribly. So I think it's probably existed in different formats, kind of throughout history. I do think, yeah, a fundamentalism is always an issue. And it's interesting though, because as you said, like, we understand the different denominations in Christianity. And even like, I come from a country where we had a civil war up north, which was talked about as being this conflict between like Catholics and Protestants, right? Now if you said to somebody, I mean, it went so much deeper than that, right? But a lot
Right.
of people just took it like, you know um and imagine you said to somebody, right? So what are they fighting? Oh, one side of cat and one side. And so what are they arguing over? Transubstantiation. And you went, oh, there was a 30-year civil war over that.
Right.
Um, and so sometimes I guess if you don't get the nuances, we don't fully understand it. And I think that's where media should do a better job of digging into it, but instead they give you this kind of simplified version, and you look at it and you go, look at the crazy people over there. And sometimes they can't, like, I suppose to me, one of the prime examples is, say, North Korea, right?
Hmm.
Because North Korea is bananas, right? And it's led by this guy who clearly has all sorts of issues,
By
is
the
an
way, is he
absolute
dead
psychotic.
or alive?
No, he's alive.
He's
He that
alive.
was a, yeah, that was a ruse to find out who was against him.
That's what he said, but I don't even know if I can believe that. It's like, oh,
Well,
I had
no,
a
but
heart attack, but I want to play it off like I'm like,
potentially, who knows? But the thing to me is, it's a terrible regime, right?
yeah.
But you could say whatever you want about North Korea over here, and people will believe it, no
Hmm.
matter what is said. There was a story a few years ago. Every man in North Korea had to get his hair cut, right, in the same way, and everyone here went, "Oh my God, that's insane!" Without ever
Yeah.
going, "Wait, could that be
Does that?
propaganda
Yeah.
on
Is that
our part?"
right? Yeah. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
What does the
I can't
enforcement of that
believe that.
look like?
I can't believe they're so brainwashed. They'll believe anything that's said. Hmm.
Right. Right. It's weird because I don't know in this day and age. Once again, this is why having cell phones in debates and things is important, because now all of a sudden somebody at a bar could be like, "Hey, Kim Jong Un made every guy in North Korea cut his hair the exact same way," and you're like, "Did he? Did he?" And then you go look it up. I don't know what the right answer is, or what the right age to stop, or like what the line is in terms of skepticism, because if you're friends with somebody, you want to trust them, because if trust is a bond, right? It's like, oh, you and I are on the same page. We speak the same language. We can communicate the same way. We have the same frame of reference for most things. We can trust the information we get from one another. But then there's also, like, it's kind of fun to fuck with people also. So I don't know. I don't know the right answer. I don't know what the if there's a hard and fast rule on what's allowable.
I think it depends on what it is that you're messing with people about. I think it's good fun, that sense of a bit of devilment, as we would call it over here. You gotta have that. But it's how it's done. It's maybe a bit like comedy overall, and I suppose I think Chris Rock does a good piece about like how comedy really only works if it's kind of punching up.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's probably true of like when you're messing with somebody, like, if you're, it depends on what you're doing it about, and it depends on how much if you're ribbing them about something that they have no control over, that's probably different than if it's a situation that they got themselves into or something like that.
Yeah, there's this comedian on Twitter who, if you're not following, his handle is at Young Crip Daddy, and he's in a wheelchair. He's quadriplegic. He can't move his body. And this guy, he's maybe, I want to say 24, 25. He started this podcast with his mother, and his mom, he just rips into her incessantly for all kinds of bullshit. And he talks about his own death. He talks about his disability. He talks about all of that stuff. And he's merciless. And he's really, really funny. And I always look at that and I'm like, that guy wants to be treated like a normal person. He wants you to rib him as much as he ribs you and himself and everybody else. And I just absolutely love that mentality of somebody who's turned their situation upside down. And so, like, I wish more people could find that sense of humor, because then all of a sudden punching up or down or sideways or whatever it is doesn't really matter anymore, because you found that place where it's like, this is a test of character. If I make fun of you in a tough situation and you laugh, that is that is a I think a compliment in many ways from the person who made the joke about you, because it's like they respect you so much that they know that you're going to take this in the way in which it was intended and not as an insult. You're not going to take it the wrong way. And I absolutely, I wish more people could do that, but you're right. I think in general, when you're talking about stuff that you don't have any frame of reference for, like punching down's not good.
That see, it is like it's a tough one because intentionality is probably a huge issue around that as well, and where you coming from. And there's a guy, he's a comedian named Reginald D. Hunter. I don't know if you've ever come across him. He's very, very funny. He's originally from Georgia. He now lives in the UK. He's a big black guy, and he makes fun constantly of, I suppose, himself and the situations that he finds himself in, because he spends a lot of time in Ireland and the UK. But he does a lot of bit around that, and people saying things to him, and other people taking offense on his behalf,
Mm-hmm.
and then saying to him, "Is that okay?" And he's like, "Well, I feel they came from a good place, so I'm not taking it badly." So yeah, it's one of those things where, like, because of social media, everything just gets, it's so easy to look at one thing that a person has said, and for that to be like the defining thing
Mm-hmm.
on them forever. And you just take, one stupid tweet, one stupid line, one thing that somebody said in an interview, and you take the 15-second clip, and that's how they're defined. And then everyone just absolutely piles on to that.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I was thinking this morning about something my wife did. So my wife wants me to eat healthier, which is good. She eats mostly vegan at this point, which I think, her vegan zealotry is just out of control. Because I opened up the refrigerator yesterday and she had made meatballs, and but there was also some vegetarian dish left over from yesterday. So she's got these containers she puts them in, Tupperware, and she put the vegetarian thing on top of the meatballs. Like I like that's gonna like that tactic is going to prevent me from eating meat. Like I can't just take the vegetarian thing off and then pull the meatballs out. But it's just, I was thinking about this. Meat is something that you probably shouldn't eat too much of because it's bad for you. It's bad for your health to eat too much meat. Um, and she's trying to get me to cut down on meat. But I was thinking, I would probably, if it came down to living 10 years longer or eating meat, I'm going to eat meat, I think. I think I'm just going to eat meat. I would rather eat meat and enjoy my meat in life than to, be miserable and never eat steak again, because I love it too much. That's what I want. And I think there are a lot of things like that we're willing to do, and somebody's like, that could kill you. You're like, okay, all right, if maybe it will. It's and I think that mentality is an older person's mentality for sure. And I started thinking like there's a lot of stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff. It's not just COVID, that people are acting like that around. People have been using that mentality for all kinds of stuff for forever. Meat, just eating meat's one of those things. Cigarettes is another thing that people just do. And I'm curious how long it's going to take for COVID to normalize, because it will normalize. And then that's kind of what we're going through right now. The idea of flattening the curve and all this stuff, like, what's going to happen is going to happen, guys. You got to start to realize that the organization in the world, the structure, it's not nearly as structured as you think. It's not nearly as well put together. It's not nearly as organized. Think about yourself for a moment and think about how you would handle a pandemic if it were just you. If somebody came to your door and said, handle this, and then it's your responsibility. All of the insanity that's going through your head of like, who the fuck, where do I even start? That's that's what somebody's really having to deal with right now. It's not like they're some octopus genius where they can just like shoot, you can't. They only have one brain. They're only one person. You're not some decentralized consciousness running things from a pyramid on the moon. Like this. That doesn't exist. These are just people doing this. And so, like, what's going to happen is going to happen, guys. If you're not wearing a mask and you get sick, like, okay, all right, well, that happened. You could be wearing a mask and get sick. That could also happen. You could be old and get sick. You could be young and get sick. You could be fully healthy and get sick. It's all possible. Most of the stuff that we figured out at this point is, that if you're older or you have some sort of illness, you are at extremely high risk. But if you are a healthy person who exercises regularly, it turns out that the same rules that operate for most respiratory infections are true for COVID. That if you're healthy, you're not as susceptible to respiratory infection. And it seems like the World Health Organization is behind that message, but they also don't want people to go outside. They don't want people to leave. And, we're at a point now where it's like, okay, well, people are going to do what they're going to do. And a lot of people are coming to the conclusion, it's like, all right, it might kill me. It might kill other people too. It's going to kill people. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And people are it's normalizing, It's gotten to the point to where it's not a crisis anymore. And I know that a lot of people are going to gristle at me saying that, but crisis is something that is happening, and it's happening all around you. The walls are coming down. That's crisis. I don't think the walls are, or at least the walls are down. It's like, okay, well, now we're in the rubbish. It's like, okay, we got to move on with our lives. What's next? Because time doesn't stop. It keeps moving regardless of what there's no pause button on the earth. So that's where we're at. Stuff kills you. We live in the world. Welcome to reality. Stuff kills you.
Welcome to TJ's TED Talk. I think, yeah. I mean, I suppose it depends on for me, some of it is, and I guess this where I mean, I don't know. I look at it, right, and what is fascinating to me is about the economy, right? Because we made the economy up. It's not really we don't owe money to anyone. We made it up. We decided money was a thing. We decided exchange rates were a thing. We decided borrowing was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
None of it's real. Like no more than anything else is real. So
right.
You want to print more money, print more money. I think that your pandemics have existed certainly throughout, but to me, the idea that no great moment in anyone's life, I don't believe, has begun with your boss saying, "Hey TJ, I need you to do this for me." Right? That's not what the best moments in your life come from.
Right.
You might have a great idea at work that you're really happy with, but it never comes from, "Come into my office, I need to speak to you." So I like we decided this was a system, and this is the system that we have right now. But this isn't a system that's always happened, and who knows what what the system looks like in 400 years time. We have no idea.
Yeah,
I just find it interesting that people are, again, like any fundamentalist, anyone who's fundamentally attached to the system, like, why are you so attached to this system? It's just a system. It's like religion. It's like we made it up. It's like a
yeah,
sports team. Like, why are you so, like, fundamentally, why can you not accept that your sports team can get things wrong, can make awful decisions? Like, why do we find sometimes it's so difficult to admit, yeah, that was awful. Really, that should not have done that. Can't, don't agree with that. No, like, I guess it's like family. Like, yeah, it was dumb. That was real dumb. I still love you, but
yeah.
yeah, that was real dumb.
You brought it up last time you were on. You talked about cognitive dissonance, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of that. It's all over the place. I would say ground zero for cognitive dissonance on the internet right now is probably Ben Shapiro. Um, are you familiar with Ben at all?
I am familiar with him.
I would say that guy probably has more conflict going on in his brain than any other human being right now who's got any sort of notoriety on the internet. I don't know how he holds some of the views that he has simultaneously. In fact, I thought of you the other day when I was thinking about another analogy for COVID, because I keep looking at this like unwinnable argument of, should people stay indoors? We got to get our lives going again. And it's like, all right, I know you guys are not going to agree on this. Um, so why can you not agree? And the reality is that when people can't agree, usually it's because they're coming from the same origin point in an argument, and they just don't understand that. And that's exactly what happens with the abortion argument. And what I thought was very interesting was that the rationalization or the rationale used for the argument for abortion, if you're pro life or pro choice, right? If you're pro life, you're against abortions in any way, shape, or form. Life must exist. The incessantness of life. It insists upon itself, and that must be respected. Life is that important, sacred. And then there's, pro choice, which is, look, life is sacred and it's mine, and I get to choose what to do with it. And it's my body, it's my choice. And if I have a baby, it's going to significantly diminish not only the quality of my life, but potentially the life of this other person. So, pro life, pro choice. COVID-19, same deal. Like, pro life, pro choice. What side are you on? And what's weird is that the political spectrum flips those positions, right? If you're pro life in abortion, you're pro choice on COVID. And a lot of people, I put that out there on Twitter the other day, and people are like, wait a second, shit. Yeah, that's going on, and you can kind of talk your way out of it if you want to. If you really start thinking about it, you're like, okay, well, there's whether or not you define an unborn baby as a person or not, and then you start going down into the details, and you can meander your way through it to say, oh, my position is correct. But just that initial reaction to it, you're like, fuck. The same rationalization I've used for a long time on this other issue that I will never agree with anybody else on is flipped on me. And I'm using the exact opposite rationalization for another issue, which is also the same, basically, on an abstract level. And I think people need to have that feeling of conflict in them, because if you don't have that feeling, then you don't know you need to resolve anything inside yourself. You need to feel that. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere.
So Ben Shapiro is the most feeliest man in the world.
Oh, he feels. Actually, I think he doesn't. I think that's the problem. Is that I want him to feel it. I want him to think that he's in conflict with himself, but he just brushes it off. You know, and I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of religious people in particular, and Shapiro is extremely religious, are very comfortable with shaking off cognitive dissonance because they've done it their whole lives. It's a defense mechanism for them. People just slap on the idea of faith, and then it's like, all right, well, faith, that's my golden castle with a perfect gate that you can't knock down. Because at that point, you're just like, if you just throw faith in there, you're like, okay, all right, well, I have decided that the way that I feel does not require facts. It doesn't require me to accept you or accept whatever you've said. It doesn't matter. And so at that point, it's like, all right, I guess conversation over.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that, and I think everyone can be guilty of it to an extent. And I think that we also see so much projection, right? Like it's phenomenal what people say, and then how they behave. And um, because people love like a simple statement, right?
Mm,
So and a slogan, and that's the slogan they have, and then like no they project against the other side, but never stop to reflect. So like when you get blue no matter who, or red no matter what,
mm.
and you never stop to reflect, and you're convinced, you're like, the other side are like absolutely corrupt. And what about our guys? No, no, no. The other side. The other side are
They're
like
the problem.
they're the problem. Like, and you're the problem if you start pointing out the flaws in our side. How
That
dare
yeah,
you?
that happens so much right now with the presidential election. Like, people are mad. People got mad at me for saying I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden, and
They got very mad. I listened yesterday to you talk to John, because I really like, I think he's quite funny.
John's awesome.
Um,
Yeah, he's really
yeah,
good.
he is. But yeah, people got real mad. But I suppose, yeah, it's a like, I'm on the outs. I don't know. I ran a presidential campaign in 2016. I didn't let the fact that I'm not an American citizen stop me, um, or that I wasn't on the ballot. And some of my platform was the abolition of Mondays, which
Abolish
I still
Mondays.
abolish Mondays. They become Sunday part two. And I think the world would be a better place.
You're
I,
going
ge- I,
with
ge-
you're going with a 4-3 split on the week instead of a 5-2.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, I think it should just be a 7-0 split. But I'm prepared to make some concessions if needs be. So that was the main thing. The other was that I like was pints and puppies. So like you could have a pint or a puppy, or both, or neither. I was very I was real diplomatic in that respect. You could have it all, or you could have nothing. That was entirely up to you. But like, who doesn't like pints or puppies?
Yeah.
I thought that was a good campaign slogan.
Okay, so I want to ask you the question: what is worth the risk? Okay, let's say there are things in life that you could die if you do this, right? It could be gradual, it could be instant. We're putting them all into the same category. Things that could kill you that are worth it, worth the risk. Because these things exist. Meat, worth it. It's totally worth it to me. It could kill me.
Hmm.
I'm same thing with alcohol or what else? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that can kill you.
Well, you know what the main cause of death is, right? Being alive.
Life, yeah.
So yeah, so anything could. It depends on, I guess, how much you want to reduce risk, and how much of a gambler one tends to be, and how much cognitive dissonance one wants to engage in.
Hmm.
So, and it's funny because everyone does it to a certain degree, and everyone kind of holds up people like, say, doctors, and they're like, the doctor says this, and I'm like, yeah, have you seen how some doctors eat or drink or smoke or consume
Yeah.
consume drugs? Like, just the sheer knowledge, that this might be harmful is not enough to change behavior. And people, I think that's where people sometimes fall down, is they think, if we just make people aware of it, then everything will change. Like everything will change once somebody becomes aware of this magic fact. So
Right.
we're going to have a discussion. I'm going to make you aware of this fact, and then everything's going to change. Your life is going to change, TJ, because you became aware of this, right?
Right.
And you're going to give up on all your old beliefs and all your old ways just because I said to you, if you continue to eat meat, it might reduce your your life expectancy. What? It didn't work with TJ. What? I don't get it.
Yeah.
So for me, I guess what do you want to term it? You want to love? Like is love the rationale? Is that what makes it worth it? The love of me, the love of whatever it is that makes it worth it. That we're prepared to roll the dice.
Hmm. Well, I mean, like that's the problem with COVID right now. It's because you tell people, is it worth it to roll the dice to feed my family? Like, and I think everyone would say yes to that question. So you can't really fault the rationalization of somebody who wants the band to be uplifted. But at the same time, if you look at the rationalization of somebody who wants the band to stay in place, it's like, I don't want any of my loved ones to die. I don't want any of your loved ones to die either. So I don't want people to die. And this is the best way in which we can accomplish that if we all just accept it simultaneously. And what I think has become the issue now is whether or not people believe that that is possible. So the belief now becomes the burden of belief now falls on the people who are quarantiners, like pro quarantine, like stay inside. And you have to, first of all, believe that that's going to work. Second of all, you have to believe that everyone is going to agree. And those two things are really, really hard standards. And I think that that's the problem with the liberal, or not liberal, but I should say maybe progressive viewpoint in general, is that, like, people who are socialists, I mean, real bona fide socialists, I think there's socialism that works in certain contexts, but people who are like bona fide socialism, communism, that's what will work the best for everybody. The problem is that it's like everybody has to be in this on the same side. They have to agree about everything. They have to work in unison, and the uniformity or the necessity for unison in a lot of these things for it to work effectively, it's too high of a standard to meet. And I think that a lot of people look at that and they say that is incongruent with human um, instinct. That is not the way human beings behave normally. So in order to get there, everyone has to behave in a different way, and I don't. And people just say like that's not going to happen, and that's the argument against that mode of thinking in general, not just on COVID, but on anything.
Yeah, it is, and but I we don't without trying it you've no idea, and I don't know, I don't think there's an easy answer to it, but I think it's easy to dismiss it because of saying people don't behave in that way, like and I think that's where both sides kind of maybe get it, like you won't ever have that full agreement, and we talked about this a little bit the last time in terms of you'll always have in society like people who want to push the boundaries on things, and that's how we possibly end up with people making inventions, making advances, that sort of stuff. And then you'll have the people who want to look after those less fortunate, the sick, the elderly, etc. And you need those people too. It's how we probably marry that that we need to look at. Extremism. I mean, we discussed that fundamentalism of any sort. When you start attaching to an idea
Hmm.
and solely an idea, to me, I don't know. You begin to lose the argument there because you're removing the person from it,
Yeah.
and I think again it goes with all issues,
Hmm.
whatever, and all the big issues. But that's what people tend to do. It's just like we should ban this, and then there'll be
Yeah.
no more issues, or we should legalize this, and then there'll be no more issues. And of course there will be. And I think that the dichotomy and the camps and the way, I mean, that's, it makes for great theater, right?
Hmm.
But it doesn't make for great decision making, and it doesn't make for great reality, like everyday life.
Right.
Sure, it looks great on screen because you have something like this and you have these two talking heads, and I argue this and you argue that, and it's kind of enthralling to watch it. But we got to go back outside and actually live life,
Right.
um, where it is messy. So to me, yeah, when you attach to an idea and solely to an idea, whatever the idea is,
Hmm.
then you lose the humanity in that.
Have you ever heard of this idea of panpsychism?
No, tell me more.
Okay, so panpsychism is this belief theory. I should really call it a theory, not a belief, because it's scientific. Well, it's a theory. There's no way to prove anything about consciousness, so I guess maybe it is a belief. Anyways, panpsychism is the belief that consciousness exists in everything at every level. So my conscious experience is the conscious experience of a person, but even the smallest things like atoms have a form of consciousness. So there's consciousness at every level of the physical universe. And the reason I bring that up is because this idea of operating as an individual, as this free moral agent, which is, I think, a pretty religious Christian view of how a human being operates as a free moral agent, that you have free will, you have choice. Your consciousness is unique to you, or maybe inside of you, that and separate from your body, but that there is an individual. And panpsychism is like there are individuals, but it's just really a different form of the same thing that's everywhere. And you know the the idea that you would represent a personal view as opposed to something that's maybe more in unison. If human beings can operate willingly in unison, then I think something like panpsychism, it gives it a lot more credence, because it allows some sort of connectivity through a subjective conscious experience that makes it possible that we can somehow link those things. Um, and that all of a sudden, and I don't know if a neural link, like Elon Musk talks about a neural link, makes that possible because panpsychism is true, or independent of panpsychism, whether or not a neural link could allow you and I to communicate basically through telepathy, or transmit information from one brain to another brain just by thinking it. That's the way a neural link would work, I think, in my head. It wouldn't just be access to information; it would be the ability to transmit information from your brain, which that's, I mean, that's crazy to think about if that's possible. We don't even know if a neural link is possible. We just know that Elon Musk is working on it. But like, if people were really to operate in a what's good for the group is unify in unison, good for everybody, right? So you're going to get what you want because everyone in the group has gotten what they want. That I just don't see how, given the variations in our subjective experiences, whether or not that's possible right now. But maybe through technology or through some advancement of science and understanding of how our consciousness work, that's possible. But I just don't see it in terms of like 100%. You're, like you said at the beginning, you're never going to get 100% agreement on anything. You're just not, and on anything. So why should it be a goal to be in a greater agreement then? That's the question. Why is it better to be in agreement with others? Is it?
Not necessarily. Certainly not necessarily. And there are plenty of examples of history where the minority were totally right. so
Yeah.
so the idea that, yeah, just because X number, like this majority believe this right now, they're right. Yeah, I mean, it's all very interesting. I think we're barely at the beginning of really understanding. anything in relation to consciousness
If somebody gave you a chance to put a
and how it all works.
if somebody gave you a chance to put a chip in your brain that gave you access to the internet, you're out, right? I mean, especially given your viewpoint on pub talk.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think, and it's funny because I remember, oh my god, it's about 5 years ago. There was a talk, right, about a guy who was formerly one of the top. He was one of the top researchers at Google, and he actually moved from Silicon Valley to the west of Ireland. And he started being a farmer, right?
Hmm.
Because it was exactly that. Like that is big, big tech is, and not in a complete Skynet way, right? But they are looking at how the future and what is it going to be, and people like Musk and various other like super wealthy billionaires are looking at like how do we, the collective conscious, and does humanity eventually evolve to merge with machinery? And we're talking like much further down the line. But basically, this guy got kind of so freaked out by this that he wanted to go back to as earthly a thing as he could. So he moves out to the west of Ireland, which is beautiful, but absolutely is the end of the world in many respects. And this is what he did. So to me, yeah, the idea that like you would you'd want you'd want access to all of that. No, I don't want it. I can understand why maybe other people would, but I don't want that. I think for me that removes the individuality, that removes the humanity, that removes the fun. Because you lose the absurd, and that I suppose that I mean wherever I come from, I love the absurd. That's I think is one of the great joys of being human, is enjoying the absurdity.
Hmm.
And so to me, you get that chip, you put that in, the absurd is gone because you move much more towards the rational. And that is, I totally get why someone might want it, but
Right.
no.
Well, this is fascinating because I think it kind of represents a different version of the unifying theory problem that physics has, right? That there is a clockwork universe that everything, one thing happening creates a chain reaction that causes another thing to happen, that causes another thing to happen, that causes another thing to happen. And you can trace it all back, and all these pieces fit together, and they all work in the same way. And it also basically shows that the idea of a of determinism is correct. Like you're on a path, and you're on a track, and then that's the way that you go, and you have no control over it. Free will does not exist. And then there's like the other side of things, which is quantum mechanics, which is a probabilistic discipline of physics, which is the opposite of having a definitive answer. Newtonian physics, which is physics. I say Newtonian just to make you understand that it's not quantum, but that's just what everybody recognizes. Like, right? Okay, I drop a ball and then it drops. Like that's physics. Newtonian physics, gravity, how all that stuff works. And so in quantum mechanics, it's probabilistic because you're, instead of looking into the past to see how things move, you're trying to figure out what's in the future. And the future is not here yet. It doesn't exist. So, of course, the cloud of probability is going to be there because it's not there. It's nothing. It's the wave function of the universe. And I think that that's where absurdity lives, right? The uncertainty of, I don't know what's going to happen. It's, no one does because it's absurd. It's unknowable. And so, like, if anyone wants to say that you can disregard that and live exclusively in a rational universe, is fooling themselves. It's impossible. You're right. You're stuck between the two things, right? The certainty and then the uncertainty, and those two things are absolute, right? And you're in the middle, which is also absolute. And that is never going to change unless you have a spaceship in which you can go travel to a black hole, which is going to kill you, but you won't know. So that's okay. Then time will slow down if you go there. You can slow time down that way. Or you can, if you have a ship that travels the speed of light, then you can move forward and time can go really fast. But it's only based off of your perception of what's happened, not because of what's going to happen. So there's there's the way that the physical universe works. I think maybe should give us a little bit of insight in how to uh, you know build our philosophy on how to live, because both of those two things are true. Both the certainty and the uncertainty, how they coexist with one another is a big mystery, but they do. We know that they do. So that it's just, I think that there you have to come to an acceptance of that before you can move forward.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's exactly that. And that's where I think you've got to get to. And I mean, again, we're talking kind of about our best ideas right now. We don't know what even things might look like a decade, 2 decades, a century from now. But I think it's all, what's interesting as well is if you said to people, right, that let's say pick a right, Jupiter, right, and let's say we had discovered a way that would allow you to go to Jupiter, but you weren't coming back, and you asked people, do you want to go? You would get a group of people who'd be absolutely like, yes, I do, and that they would come from all sectors of society.
Yep.
People who had it all and people who had nothing. And then you'd get people who go, no way, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
There's not a hope in the world. So again, it's just really interesting if you offered that choice to people, they what it would be. And like it's finding that balance. And I think some of it is just recognizing that in others, and it's giving up on that desire to have everyone agree with you, or it's maybe giving up on that desire to prove your wife wrong when she's watching television.
I will never give up on that. Uh, she's just so wrong. No, it's I no. I think you're right. It would be someone's going to be the first human being to lay eyes on Jupiter. And maybe it's
At
already
some
happened
point.
from a previous civilization, but we don't know that. So, as far as we're concerned, whoever that is, there's going to be somebody. So
Hmm.
in history. It might happen during our lifetimes. Probably will, where a human being sees Jupiter for the first time and then looks at a
Hmm.
gas giant with physical human eyes. Um, that I'm very curious about, because we kind of know what it looks like because we've taken pictures of it, and pictures are pretty good representations of things. But I also
Hmm.
know that when I take a picture of the mountains out here in Colorado, they don't look like what I see.
Hmm.
It's this little line of tiny little mountains that I don't really have. It's like, that's not fair, because my eyes are way better at seeing than a camera is. And so like me just saying that and people understanding the context for that, because you've seen those mountains,
Hmm.
they don't look like they look in pictures.
No, not at
They,
all.
I'm guessing that a gas giant's gonna look fucking crazy to somebody.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No matter how good a photo you get of a sunset, it's not the same, you know?
Yeah.
It's just totally that, so that will be spectacular. Now that person will see it, and will never probably won't be able to share that with anyone other than
Of course
like
not. Yeah.
a link, and go, wow, that was amazing. And hopefully completely worth it for what they'll have given up.
That's right. That's the other part of it, is like when I go hiking, it's like, oh, this is amazing. All right, let's go. And then you walk back down the hill and you get back in your car and you drive home. That's not possible if you go to Jupiter.
No,
You're dying
no.
there.
At least not yet, you know?
Right. You need a gas station somewhere on Jupiter. You need
Yeah.
a way to create fuel, which that's why water being so plentiful in space is valuable, because you can turn water into a fuel source if you're good enough at chemistry. Which,
Hmm.
if you're traveling to Jupiter, you better be good enough at chemistry to make water into fuel so that you can get back. That's then and that I am curious about that. So did I tell you that I'm trying to write a book right now?
No, you didn't.
I'm writing actually, I have three book ideas that I'm working on. But the main one right now is a science fiction book that's based 800 years in the future. It's kind of like an apocalypse book, really, because the Earth is fucked. We've screwed up the tectonic plates, and so they're earthquakes and volcanoes. I did a lot of research on what would cause catastrophic earthquakes and volcanoes, and the kind of like a doomsday scenario. And apparently, rocks that can absorb water way down in the Earth's crust around the tectonic plates where they meet, it creates this fluidity that allows the plates to move a lot easier, which causes massive earthquakes. And so, if we started drilling a lot, especially deep sea drilling to get at whatever resources we need to get at, it's going to push more of that water down in there in between those plates, and it's going to fuck up the planet. So I'm guessing that's the premise of where the book starts, is like that's where the Earth is. And also, I figured that all the billionaires, at that point trillionaires on the world, that fucking hate the rest of us and just like resent all of our complaining and want to do their own thing, and they're like, I have all these resources, shut up and let me do my own thing. All of those people are going to go to the moon, which is 280,000 miles away from Earth. No one has any idea of how far away the moon is from the Earth. Like, you have no concept of how far 280,000 miles is. People may think that they know. Do you realize how long it takes to get to the moon? It takes a long time. It takes a really, really long time. It takes like a week to get to the moon. So I just love that. So my goal was like to try to create as realistic a universe in the future as possible. And so a lot of the stuff that you see, like hyperspace travel, like I can travel the speed of light now. We're not going to be able to travel the speed of light anytime soon. In 800 years, I don't think we'll be able to travel the speed of light, because of what I know about how light travels and what happens to physical objects when they move that fast. Guess what happens? They blow up, they explode, and they turn into a sun. That's what happens when physical objects move that fast. So, the I just don't think people realize what they're asking for when they put all this stuff together. And the best thing that the moon would provide you, if you have limitless resources, is independence. It's freedom, right? Because there's no real reason to be on the moon other than to pull water out of, to make it a gas station, to make it like a solar system gas station for space travel. That's the only real reason to be up there, unless you're like in a society like ours where travel isn't really that big of a luxury. Anyone can get on a plane. Well, not right now, but you know what I mean? Like, it's affordable for people to travel. So the only other reason to be up there would be for independence. I want to do what I want to do. I want to control things, and I want to get away from accountability from other countries or nations or any other institution that wants to fuck with me. So that's the premise of my book, is that all of the rich people, the one percenters, are all up on the moon, and they've created their meritocracy up there. Meanwhile, the rest of us are down on the earth complaining about it and how they've fucked up the earth through mining and all of that. And we're trying to figure out how to save an overpopulated planet from annihilation, and they don't really seem to be helping that much. So, and then also everybody's distracted by culture and sports and all of the other bullshit that we're always, and it's like, if
So it's set now or 800 years in the future?
yeah, it's in the future, but very little has changed. I guess that's my point. One of the main characters is a guy, he's like the only person who's been able to live in a computer. So there's one, right? And that's the other big point that I wanted to make with the book, is like, you think that that's an easy thing to do, that it's just going to happen at some point, that we're going to be able to transfer consciousness from a human body into a computer. And my point is going to be like, it'll probably happen once with somebody who's really fucking weird, and they're going to live forever, or have at least the ability to. And then they're going to become an enormous asshole. And so that's how I think that's going to work. And then he's going to prevent anyone else from getting it. Once one person does it, and then they realize what it is, and then they look back and they're like, I can't let anybody else do this. What do you think I am, crazy? I'm not going to let anybody else have this. That's how that's going to work. And that's how it works in my book. Is that something you would read? Are you listening to this and you're like, yeah, a giant city on the moon? That'd be pretty cool looking. And by the way, the capital of the planet basically is in Denver because all the oceans have screwed up the coastlines everywhere. So Denver is now the capital, and also John Elway is a god. Also, so I'm sure you'll love all
So again, it's 800 years in the future, or it's now,
that.
because it sounds like that sounds like an awful lot of people I know from Colorado.
Well, I wanted people in Colorado to be like, "Yeah, Colorado." I figured that's kind of the way Ozark did it, right? Because I'm from that area of the country, and Ozark has made that area of the country now this like it's some sort of seedy criminal underbelly. Which there's some of that stuff going on. I won't lie.
That's going on everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It goes on everywhere. It cracks me up where they're like, yeah, the Kansas City Mafia. I lived in
But
Kansas City. I know
the
what the Kansas City Mafia does. They don't care about opiate trade in the Ozark Mountains. They care about the Simone Award, which is a high school football award, and that's basically it.
It's funny though, because what was it, season two of Fargo? That had the Kansas City Mafia, and now Ozark. So the Kansas City Mafia getting a lot of love there in Hollywood in recent years.
I just think it's
Um,
funny anytime I see one of these mob movies, and they always have like a card game they gotta go l- loot, and it's like, who's playing cards? It's 2020, man.
People on trains. I think those are the people who play cards. But it's what was interesting, right? Was as you were talking there about, we were talking about space travel and stuff. I was thinking about like that idea of identity and the way in which people identify, right, with their town, and then maybe with their state, and then maybe with their region, right? So then the talk has always been like, and it would be true to an extent, right? If there was suddenly an alien force that arrived, suddenly nation states disappear to an extent, right? And everyone, we're all in it together until somebody decided, wait, this isn't going the way of humanity. We should get involved with the others and are totally prepared to sell everyone else out, because that's how that would go entirely. I guarantee it. It'll be like, oh yeah, no, we'll hitch our wagon with you guys, because clearly this is going one way.
Yeah.
So that idea of identity, again, I think is just, people want it to be fixed, and people want it to be like, this is who I am.
Mhm.
But it's absolutely fluid, and it totally depends on your circumstances at that time.
Yeah, and I think the one place that kind of challenges that is China, because the culture around China is of unity, right? One China. And that's a really strong message for a lot of people there. And remember when the NBA got all in bad with China because of the Hong Kong protests, and
Mm.
basically just bowed to China immediately because they were threatening them with removing the league from there. And the NBA makes almost as much money out of China as they do out of the United States at this point. In fact, I think they're looking at it and they think they might make more out of China very soon. So it's a huge economic. They have big reasons to be over there. So I understand why they don't want to piss China off, but it was definitely a cultural headbutting moment, right? Because the way that people in, for lack of a better phrase, the free world, are we're all about democracy, and you're allowed to espouse your views, and you're allowed to hold these opinions against the state because it keeps the state in check. And China's like, we don't need to be in check. That's not what this is. We need to operate as a group. We need to be in unison. We need to do everything together because we're one family. We're one China. And that's the whole, a lot of that is, Eastern religion, I think, placates that in terms of the hierarchy of the country. And I think it makes it easier for people over there to comprehend operating in unity, in unison, and why that's so valuable. And I think, you've mentioned it. We're both sports fans. Being a part of a group that all is behind the same thing is fun. There's a euphoria that you get when you are a part of a sea of humanity that gets to be do the same thing together before you even. It's like not you didn't have to coordinate this. Everybody knows the reaction when you score a touchdown of what that's supposed to be. It's just
Hmm.
immediate. So, I'm curious about what the evolution of that looks like. I'm curious what a country who is that obsessed with it culturally, of being together and being in unison, how they will evolve over the next 400 or 500 years, because that culture is going to change a lot. And I think especially given how successful China has been economically, how much they seem to have been able to basically because of how on board most people are in China with the one China idea of, like, the government's going to oppress and do some things that we don't agree with a lot of times, like the one child policy was a big, people around the world were like, that's wrong, and because they were sterilizing people who had too many children. A lot of times you get fined for having kids. Like, there's a lot of really, stuff in there that seems icky to us, you know and I've tried to give a lot of credence to that thought process, because I think that there's maybe a way of viewing that is less acerbic than the way that I view it, just as an American.
Well, I think right. So I think that there is massive power in getting getting behind something, because I'm thinking about and I don't know if this is true, but this is a story that I heard in relation to higher ed. Was that at Harvard, right? So they had it's going back to a couple of change of presidents a while back,
Hmm.
and Harvard had slipped a little bit, and so the new president came in and had a one Harvard policy with the aim of making Harvard the number one institution in the world. Right. So everything was based around the one Harvard policy.
Hmm.
So if there was, let's say we were both pitching ideas, right? And there was a disagreement in terms of which way we should go. It came down to the one Harvard policy. Which of these ideas is best suited to making us the number one institution in the world? And so then, like, say your idea got picked up and mine didn't. Well, the reason was it was just better suited, and you want to be on board with us being the number one institution in the world, right, Colum? So it
Yeah.
becomes very difficult then to argue against that, because you're arguing against the team. So
Right.
it's not that my idea was rejected. It's just that this idea was better in terms of getting us to our goal. And so everyone will row in behind a goal. It's like on a team. Certain players, because of their ability, are given a lot more leeway than others, right? They can get away with certain things, and people will get behind that because, well, we need this guy to get us to our goal. So if you give people that, I suppose, that goal, that destination, you give them a sense of purpose. Wow, what you can do with that is absolutely incredible. If you don't give that to people, then everyone's off doing their own thing. But so yeah, if you can harness that, wow, what you can do is phenomenal.
Let's not put a country on this, but just a kind of a yes or no. Let's keep this in the abstract. Do you think that we will ever have to worry about another master race kind of situation on our planet?
Um, I, yeah. I mean, I don't agree with the idea of the end of history. Certainly, as and I think that there was probably um more to it, and it's really interesting if you dig back, and I think it's Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast are really good in terms of digging into, say, the First World War, and then the way in which that leads into the Second World War.
Hmm.
And again, like, it's there was all the absolute, like, that idea of just like the master race, right? But you also had so much more going with it, and I do think that you will. I don't how I worry about certainly conflict, and I think that you are in issues like what we're seeing around the pandemic, and issues around what you're seeing, like you're talking about, say, deep sea drilling and the impact that has, right? And there's no doubt that um, in some way, shape, or form, we have an impact on the planet and the resources of the planet. So I think that, there's certainly an enormous potential for future conflict in the world. And you see things going on today, and it's, that things happen, and it's not just the NBA who turn a blind eye to situations. We turn a blind eye when we don't want, and I include all of us, because Ireland is as heavily aligned to the US and UK and etc. But we're willing to turn a blind eye when it suits us, and we're
Yeah.
willing to turn the screw in other ways when it's somebody we don't like. So to me, we're not nearly, I don't buy the idea of the parallels that we're so close to um a conflict right now. Like, I know that people talk about, like, they're seeing parallels to the kind of the period in the lead up to, say, 1917. I don't see that, but I do see um I, I do see the potential. Certainly, I think the idea that everything is going to be hunky dory, and where we live in a world without conflict.
I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but like Boris Johnson, if he had died from COVID, I think that shit would have hit the fan. With, you're talking about the events leading up to World War I, and the parallels that a lot of people see there, because although I think the Spanish influenza happened at the end of World War
Yeah.
I, but the just like the idea of an assassinate, like a political assassination of some kind, we haven't had one of those in a while, and fortunately, um, and I'm not trying to say like we're overdue for that, but bad shit happens, and we know that people are really mad right now politically. They are very hypercharged, kind of absolutist, and you're getting to that point to where you think, okay, well, we are susceptible to extremism right now. And I think that is true. I think we are very susceptible to extremism right now. And I was concerned when Barack Obama got elected. I'm like, man, these fucking white supremacists, they're not going to let this happen. Somebody's going to take a fucking gun and they're going to kill that guy. And it didn't happen. And everybody's happy that didn't happen. But I remember being really worried about that. And I remember hearing a lot of people say, like, look, you know, people are crazy. And then when Donald Trump got elected, I was thinking the same thing with him. I was like, people hate that guy. People hate that guy enough to where some crazy person might try to take him out. And that hasn't happened. We haven't had any political assassinations in a while. But that's the thing that set off World War I, and along with a lot of other things. But that was certainly a part of it. The
Y-
Archduke
yeah,
Ferdinand assassination.
absolutely. But what's if you remove the tragedy of somebody being assassinated, and you look at the way in which that happened, and just the haphazard nature, like, talk about like, that's where chance, and that's where the best laid plans, and that's where you were talking about earlier about the system not being nearly as tight as maybe people wanted to be. That's a perfect example of it. Like, it goes wrong initially, and then the driver gets it completely wrong and ends up going back down the same street where the guy just happens to be, and it's like, I must be the luckiest guy alive. This is what were the odds? Like,
Yeah.
you think, oh, we've made the biggest mess of this imaginable. You basically, you threw the interception, and it was headed for a pick six, and suddenly the guy fumbled it on the 2 yard line. You picked it up and you managed to run it back down the field if you're on that team. But, like, the odds on it were ridiculous. It was so chaotic, and yet look what happened in the aftermath of that. So yeah, it probably will be something chaotic that will set it off. And I do think, yeah, that the you know the inequality and extremism are a potent mix, and it can they all it takes then, the kindling is there, and all it takes is a match to be dropped, and then the whole thing goes up.
Yeah. And at this point, I've always been curious about whether or not instead of changing the system of democracy too much, you know, keeping the same system is okay. I think most people are kind of pretty much on board with democracy in the world right now. Um, there are some issues with it though, and part of the issue is that it's like a filter. You know, if you're drinking clean water, like I use a filter. We put it in a pitcher, so all the water that we drink, it comes from the sink, then it goes in a pitcher, it filters it out, then we drink the water. We got to change that filter all the time because the water here in Colorado is not that good. There's a lot of stuff floating around in it. It's just the way the water is here. So you need that. You need the filter, and the filter needs to be changed regularly. We have not changed the filter on democracy in like 300 years. So, I don't have a problem with the system necessarily. I have a problem with the lack of custodianship of the system.
Hmm.
Like, there has just been no cleaning of the filters. We haven't replaced any of the filters. We haven't replaced anything. The engine has been the same engine. It's been running bone dry, no oil for decades. And it is a problem. So just like simply saying we got to fix this is not like we don't have to burn it down and then become communists. We don't have to burn it down and anoint a dictator. We don't have to do that. We can just change the filter.
Yeah,
It doesn't seem like it's that hard.
tweak it, like, look at term limits. I would say, and I know other people that have opinions, I think term limits, I think um that would make a big difference everywhere. I think people being in situ in the same elected position for 20, 30, 40 years opens up people. I think you need to look at lobbyists, and the role of lobbyists, and putting that in the open, and a register, or, and again, look, I'm not saying that this magically fixes it, or this makes there will always be exceptions, but you got to look at ways to try and tweak things, and to improve them, so that you don't get the collapse. Because if you don't fix the car,
Mm-hmm.
eventually it stops running, and then that's when you got the real issues, because who's coming to fix your car, or who's coming to take your car from you then?
Right. Well, and two, like if I could make one major tweak, it would be the ability of the government as an institution to fund other institutions. And that would cause a massive disruption in the way in which things are presently being done. But in actuality, what that would do is that would create a walled garden around the government that would allow it to operate as something that affects people directly, and doesn't do anything else. It just serves citizenry, nothing else. Citizenry. And be very, very clear about individuals being the reason and purpose of government, as opposed to corporations, businesses, or any other type of institution. Because then all of a sudden, lobbyists don't have a job to do anymore. Because there's no money there for them to get. So if that's all you got to do, is you just have to make it and say, look, the government shall not give funds to any institution or entity that is not an individual, a human being. And at that point, it's like, okay, all right. Well, now you got to pick and choose how to disperse that money. And then all of a sudden it becomes very, very apparent you can only do it one way. You either got to pick and choose individuals on an individual basis, or you got to give it to everybody. And then it's like, okay, all right, well, UBI is very easy at that point. All of this stuff that everybody's complaining about all of a sudden becomes very, very easy because corporations have been removed from the equation entirely. They become an independent entity that you can build as individuals, separate from the government, but the government will not at any point help you build that. You got to do that. And the government will help you as an individual, but they're not going to help your institution. The corporation, the ability of people to use corporations as a tool has just run amok. I mean, and nobody wants to admit that. No, because they love the money too much. It makes it way too easy to make money. It should be a lot harder to make money that way than it is, because it's so easy to do that. If you equated the difficulty of making money as a corporation to the difficulty of making money as an individual, and you made it the same, all of a sudden corporations are not that powerful anymore.
Yeah, you suddenly get a more level playing field. Like right now, you have basically the Pee Wee League playing the guys who are juiced up on steroids, and
Yeah.
funnily enough, that's not a fair game.
Right. Yeah, I always see these. There's like a GIF of a video of this like. It's like somebody who's the size of Derrick Henry playing Pee Wee League players, and he just like picks them up by the helmet and then puts them on the ground. That's what it is right now. It's not even a game. And if there's one thing that I think when we talk about like these inalienable rights that human beings have, you have a right to play the game. And if we are going to make money a fundamental institutional like you can't get around it. Money exists. And I know it's supposed to be a representation of a thing, but it at this point is a fundamental necessity if you're going to operate in society. If we're going to give it that important a role, everyone has an inalienable, indelible right to play the money game. If that's what we're saying, and if that's true, then everybody, you got to give people, you got to bring the floor up, because right now the floor is death, right? The bottom. If you're stuck at the bottom, you're one paycheck being missed paycheck away from starving to death. And that's a lot of people, right? We got to change the floor from there to equity, right? You have the ability to invest your money and play the money game. That's where the floor should be. It should not be death. And we have enough to do that in a civilized society. You in Ireland have enough to do it. The Brits have enough to do it. United States has more than enough to do it. It's very easily solvable as long as you just tell the money people who are in charge right now to fuck off. It's like, we're not doing that.
Which you can do.
You can. Yes. You can do that. You can do it right now. All right. Well, I've yelled at you, I feel like, for the last hour and a half. I'm so sorry.
No,
I just brought you on to yell at you.
No, it was enjoyable. These chats are always good fun, and I definitely let's do it again at some stage.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Colum, do you have anything to promote?
Do I have anything to promote? If people are working in higher ed, yeah, there's a podcast. And if you want to listen to more of my Irish accent and Michael McQuaid, who's from the north, who has his Irish accent, then Broncos Europe. But there's no money in either of those things. They're both labors of love.
I keep trying to get Michael to come on, but he's being difficult. He's being a superstar. He's being like a famous person.
Yeah, but so those two things, Adventures in Advising is the podcast, and Broncos Europe is what we do. But they are absolutely labors of love. But I do enjoy both, and yeah, we're always look. It's all about this. It's like just having the chat and just trying to create that sense of community. So
absolutely,
I'll definitely come back on again. It's always good fun, and yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and hey, by all means, if I'm talking too much, just be like, let me get a word in. I have a tendency to do that because it's my radio background. I just keep talking until I run out of a runway.
No, it's all good. No, I always feel I get an opportunity. I think it's good. Like it works as the back and forth.
Yeah, for sure.
So conversations go.
That's why I like you guys over at Broncos Europe and Colum. You do a great job. We didn't talk at all about Nicolas Cage. I promoted you on the show today as Nicolas Cage expert, and we didn't even get to any Nick Cage stuff.
Wait, well, look, there will be future episodes. You know, I mean, we talked Wesley Snipes instead.
We did. We can do a cataloging of Nicolas Cage movies
Yeah,
in which he has existed. Um,
or in which he should exist.
or in which he should exist. That's a way better exercise. Is
I
movies
mean,
that Nicolas
I
Cage
think
should
that
be
would
in.
be really interesting. Yeah,
Give me one. Just give me one. You're like Nick Cage.
what immediately comes to mind is I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a movie called Fitzcarraldo, and it's another Werner Herzog movie, and I just think he would have been perfect in it. It's about trying to get a steamship over a waterfall. And if you haven't seen it, I'm going to send you a clip on Twitter because it's Werner Herzog in the jungle talking about the jungle, and he made it with a guy named Klaus Kinski who was absolutely bananas. And these guys had a bet, and Herzog lost the bet, and he had to eat his boot, and he did. He boiled and ate his boot.
Wow.
So I think if you put Nicolas Cage into that mix, magic would even more magic would happen.
Yeah, I think Nicolas Cage. It was a huge disservice that he was not in The Hunt for Red October.
Oh yes,
Nicolas Cage trying to do a Russian accent is what I need. He needs to be, the guy who's in Jurassic Park, who's like the second officer on The Hunt for Red October. I want
yeah.
that. He's the main guy in Jurassic Park. That's the role I want Nicolas Cage to play, because I want to see him and Sean Connery, neither of whom know how to do a Russian accent, yelling at each other, doing fake Russian accents, and Alec Baldwin's also there.
Yeah, I'm totally on board. We need to get the movie remade, but that just with the exact same cast, right? Even as they are now, and just put Nicolas Cage in that role.
Yes. Yeah. Ah, that's so good. There's so many movies I want to put Nick Cage in now.
That's what that we'll do more the next time. I think that is the perfect ending. We leave people with Nicolas Cage in a submarine with Sean Connery. I think that is perfect.
Oh yeah, and there's some other really good Sean Connery movies as well that we could put him into.
Oh
Like
yeah,
Dragonheart,
yeah,
where
yeah,
Nick Cage
yeah.
is the dragon. Let's do it.
I'm gonna have a think about what would be maybe the top 3 movies that I would like to see Nicolas Cage in, and we will discuss those the next time.
All right, that sounds great, Colin. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
It's been a pleasure as always.
All right, we are out of here.
Take it easy.